All right. So, last week we met a group of people in crisis. We have 2 million Israelites. They are slaves in Egypt. They're under a pharaoh who just commanded the entire population to throw every Hebrew baby boy into the Nile, right? We met 2 midwives, Sifra and Pua, and they decided to fear God more than fearing the pharaoh, okay? So this week we're going to find out what happened to one of those newborn baby boys, okay? So we're going to read Exodus 2, starting in verse 1. Now a man from the house of Levi went and took as his wife a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes, and daubed it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the riverbank. And his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the river, while her young women walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds, and sent her servant woman, and she took it. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the child was crying. She took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrew children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. When the child grew older, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, because she said, "I drew him out of the water." So I like to call this little section the meeting of Pharaoh's daughters and the Levite daughters. Okay? And this becomes a really good highlight of the role of women in Moses' life. Okay? So this baby is Moses, and we get to meet all of the women who had influence over him in his life. So we're not given names here in chapter 2. They will come a little bit later in Exodus 6. But the Levite father's name here is Amram, and his name means high people. And his Levite wife is Jochebed. It's a fun name to say. Her name literally means Yahweh is glorified. Okay? And according to Exodus 6, which we will talk about when we get there, but Jochebed is actually Amram's aunt. Okay? I'll let you process that one for a minute.
Say that one more time.
Jochebed is Amram's aunt and wife. So it is his father's sister that he marries.
You know,
Okay.
they're
both Levites.
What did you say Jochebed meant?
It means Yahweh is glorified. The literal translation is Yahweh is glorified. Yeah. So remember we talked about how all the Israelites are all intermarrying with each other? Okay. But these are these are 2 Levites.
Somehow.
Right. But we're at 2 million, but yeah. We have 2 Levites who end up marrying each other. Okay? So from their marriage, we have this baby boy. Now the ESV describes him as fine. Okay? He's a fine child. That does not mean he's okay. It literally is a word that means good, beautiful, pleasant, agreeable, cheerful, joyful, sweet, and well-favored. So he was fine, young. Okay? He was that kind of fine. So Jochebed hides this baby for 3 months. Now, I don't know how many of y'all have had newborns in your house. That is a miracle in and of itself to hide a newborn for 3 months because newborns are loud. The only thing they know how to do is cry. That's it. That's all they can tell you and communicate with you is cry. And she is able to hide him for 3 months. When she can't hide him anymore at 3 months old, she does something that looks like surrender, but it's actually one of the most strategic acts of faith in the Old Testament. Okay? She takes a basket, and the Hebrew word here is the same word for Noah's Ark. So she took an ark, a little mini ark, okay? And she covers it with tar and pitch, just like Noah did to his ark, okay? And then she places it in the reeds, okay? She's technically obeying Pharaoh's command here. Technically. But remember, we're going to find loopholes in a lot of Pharaoh's commands. Because he said, put him in the Nile. He didn't say we couldn't put him in the reeds in the Nile.
In a basket.
In a basket. And forget the waterproof aspect of the basket. In a waterproof basket in the reeds, but technically she's obeying the command.
He's in the water.
He's in the water.
He's in the knot, okay?
He's in the water.
This
Now-
explains my second born so much.
Right?
The loopholes.
Loopholes in the
Always a
command.
loophole.
Is the second born the tattooed?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Middle child.
Got it.
So here's where our Sunday school version kind of differentiates. We've often seen in entertainment where Jochebed puts the basket in the river and you see it floating past like alligators and the rushing waters and there's alligators chomping and things like that's not what happened. Y'all, she literally just put it in the river bank with all of the reeds so he couldn't go out into the Nile, okay? So she picks a strategic place. She doesn't just go out of her house and put him in the reeds. She actually goes near the palace and puts him in front of where she knows that the most powerful woman in Egypt takes her baths. Okay?
She's a smart woman.
She's an incredibly smart woman. Okay? So, we also find out that Big Sister is watching all of this happen. This Levite daughter is Miriam. Now, she's old enough to walk around and have a conversation, so we know that she's older. She's probably about 7 or 8, maybe upwards of 10. So we know that Moses is not the firstborn. He's actually not even the firstborn son. Aaron, his brother, is 3 years older than him. Okay? So Jochebed has Miriam, who's anywhere from 7 to 10. She has Aaron, who's about 3 at this time, and then baby Moses. Okay, so she's got her hands full with these.
So
three
the
kids.
reason Aaron didn't get put in the river is because that decree hadn't been made
Right.
yet?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
He was born a couple of years earlier before the decree.
Okay.
So, if the Pharaoh from chapter 1 is our Thutmose I, history gives us an incredibly fascinating person for his daughter. Her name is Hatshepsut. Yeah, say that one 5 times fast. It's actually the word hat, okay? Shep. Sut. Hatshepsut.
Which one of your books already we talked about all this?
Midwives of Moses.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm like, I'm all, this is all, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like,
yeah, it's all coming back to
She-
the
Well, it's
Yes, she's an incredibly fascinating woman, and we're going to talk about her for a minute. She is the only fully royal daughter, so her mother and father were both the full royals, okay? She was born to the great royal wife, okay? That was her mother. So history records that Thutmose I, which is her father, forced her to marry her half-brother, Thutmose II, to secure the throne, okay? So she's married to her half-brother, okay? But her reign was marked with a deep affection for foreign people. We have all kinds of inscriptions on her temple that literally read, quote, her spirit inclined toward foreign people. Okay? So that is how she is described, is that her heart literally bent toward the foreign people in her nation. So she is exactly the kind of woman who would, as she was bathing one day, open a basket and find a foreign child and hear its cry, and her heart move and bend towards this baby and want to protect this baby. She knows perfectly well it's a Hebrew child. She even tells one of her ladies in waiting this. She decides to keep him anyway. Okay? So she is disobeying her own father's command at this point. Okay?
Does she have any children?
She does not. We'll learn about that in a minute. She was not able to bear children. She never
Not
bears
with her
children.
half-brother.
It's not for lack of trying.
I know what he was doing.
Yeah, it's not for lack of
But
trying.
there's so many intermarrying back
Yes.
then.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Especially among the Egyptian royalty, because they
Yes.
believe you had to marry a god to stay a god. So there was lots of brothers and sisters and half brothers and sisters, and that's why a lot of their children did not survive. We know Ramses II only had 2 daughters, and they both died in infancy because there was so much incest that was going on. So it's actually kind of surprising that they do have any children at all that survive. Okay, so she decides to keep him, and there's this is another woman in the story who defies the standing order to kill the children. These women of Exodus are not passive. They are making life and death decisions, and they keep choosing life, even if it's going to cost them their own. They're protecting these children. So then Miriam, big sister, she steps out and she offers, can I get you a wet nurse? Okay, because you're going to need somebody to take care of this baby. Because remember, we don't have infant milk, right?
Yeah.
we gotta find somebody who is either currently pregnant or was currently pregnant to nurse this baby. And so she says, sure, go find me a woman.
I got just the one.
I got just the one in mind. She goes home and gets mama, okay? And brings mama to the daughter, okay?
Moses' mom?
Yes,
Yes.
mother, Lord's mother.
Yeah.
And Hatshepsut
Shame, lady.
pays Moses' mother to raise him.
To raise
To
her
nurse
kid.
him.
Raise
I
and
know,
nurse
what's
her
this
own
lady's name?
child.
We know her name.
Hatshepsut.
That's Moses' mom?
No, that's the Pharaoh's daughter.
No, what's Moses' mom?
Jochebed.
I like her.
Jochebed gets paid to take care of her own child.
And she gets paid for it.
And he gets to stay alive.
And he gets to stay alive. And so he's literally now under the protection of Pharaoh's daughter in his own home, so nobody can take him. Because she is getting paid and has royal protection to take care of this baby. So she raises him probably for at least 2 to 5 years. It would be whenever he decided he was ready to be weaned, because children in that day and age decided whenever they were ready. So you kind of like let the child decide. But upwards of about 5, anywhere between 2 and 5. Okay, so she's getting paid to take care of her own daughter, or her own son. So God has a sense of humor here. Okay, so Moses spends his earliest years with his own mother, and I can guarantee you she uses every moment of that, because once he's weaned, he's going to get taken. Okay, so she teaches him about God and about his people and who he really is from his earliest moments. Okay. So when he finally is weaned, she brings him to Pharaoh's daughter, who formally adopts him into the Egyptian royal family. He's given a name, Moses, meaning to draw out. So as the years have passed, this Pharaoh's daughter has not forgotten her son in waiting. Okay? She remembers that moment even though it's been a few years. He's raised with the best education in the known world at the time. He would have been trained in leadership, military strategy, administration, and he becomes a legitimate heir to the Egyptian throne. Okay? Here's where the history gets so fascinating. So during Hatshepsut's 22-year reign, we have Egyptian records, okay, now this is Egyptian history, of a mysterious figure that rises out of obscurity to the highest level of Egyptian power available. His name is Zen in Mut. Okay, that's his Egyptian name. He's a commoner with no royal blood, and yet Hatshepsut bestows 90 titles on him. 90, including hereditary crowned prince of Egypt, master of all people, chief royal architect, and royal vizier. Okay. He designs her grand temple complex, which I will show you. This is the remains of her grand temple complex. I'll pass it around for you to see. He designs it, this person, including an inner sanctum, which you can't see in that picture, it's actually more hidden in the mountains, called the Holy of Holies. Okay? He disappears at one point without a trace, and the last mention of him in Egyptian records corresponds to the same year, and Moses would have been 40.
What am I missing?
We'll get there.
Yeah.
A twin tomb complex was discovered for him, so a little basically mini version of that, to where when he passed away, he would have been buried kind of next to her in kind of the same fashion with her. Moses.
Okay. To his adopted mama?
Yes.
Okay.
So we found this twin tomb complex, but it was never finished, and it was sealed with tools still inside, meaning that something happened before they could finish it, and they basically just sealed it up to forget about it, and kind of as like a marker of this man did not die here in Egypt. Okay. It was later violently destroyed, the twin complex and her complex. Okay. Many scholars believed that if this man and Moses were the same person, and if they're right, okay, Moses was not just this random person, okay? He would have been one of the most powerful men in Egypt at the time and have great influence over Egypt. And if he did design that We see a lot of similarities between that building and what we will come to know as the tabernacle, including that they both house a Holy of Holies. Okay?
Wow, I got the chills.
Yeah. This is why we study the Egyptian history too. It just all lines up so perfectly.
Have you been there before?
No, I would love to go. I've seen so many pictures of it.
Yeah.
And we know that,
So you're saying that the man that mysteriously rose to this crazy power was perhaps Moses?
yes,
Because Moses
everything
was
lines
gone.
up.
And he came back when he was 40 years old.
No, he leaves at 40. So this man
Oh,
mysteriously disappears in the same year.
She had her adopted son until he was 40, and then he mysteriously disappears. But then this person that out of nowhere comes and she gives him all the power.
Yeah, he disappears the same year of
Okay.
the Egyptian records and when we have Moses' records.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, he basically is a commoner who rises up to be one of the most powerful people. He designs all these different things. He's given all of these titles, including Crown Prince of Egypt. Okay, Royal Vizier, Royal Architect. Okay. Alright, so Jochebed, Moses' mother, placed her son in one of the most dangerous rivers in Egypt, but in the most strategic location she could find, trusting God with his outcome. She couldn't control what happened, but she could be faithful with what God had given her. Okay? So let's read further on what happens to Moses. Verse 11 in chapter 2. One day, when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and looked on their burdens. And he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his people. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. When he went out the next day, behold, 2 Hebrews were struggling together. And he said to the man in the wrong, "Why do you strike your companion?" He answered, "Who made you a prince and judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid and thought, "Surely this thing is known." When the Pharaoh heard of it, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and stayed in the land of Midian, and he sat down next to a well. Okay? So Moses is 40 years old. He has spent the last 4 decades as Egyptian royalty. And then something shifts. He goes out to see his people, the Hebrew people. And he finds that their life is a far cry from his life in the palace. And the text says he saw their burdens, but it's more than just a passive observation. In the original language, it's actually he's identifying with them and their burdens for the first time. So he looks at these people not as strangers or foreigners, but as his people. Okay? So he sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave, and he looks this way, and he looks that way, just to make sure nobody's watching. What do we call this in American legal system?
Premeditated.
Premeditation. It wasn't done out of anger. It was premeditation. Nobody's watching me, I can get away with this. Okay? And he kills the Egyptian. And then he hides the evidence. He buries his body in the sand.
He
Okay?
did get his wits from his mom.
No.
He does. Bigger hole.
Dig a bigger hole, literally. Digs himself into a hole,
Yeah.
buries the body. Acts 7, Luke tells us Moses did this believing that the Hebrews would understand from this act, the act of killing an Egyptian, that God was sending Moses to deliver them. That's what Moses believed.
That's what he taught.
That's what he thought.
That's what Moses thought?
hmm According to Luke. So he was in his own way trying to start a revolution. Okay? The people did not get the memo. Okay, that Moses was their deliverer. They didn't get the memo. Because the very next day he goes out and he sees 2 Hebrews and they're fighting with each other. And he tries to intervene and he finds out who's wrong, right? And the man who is wrong turns to him and doesn't say, "Sure, thanks for clarifying that. I'm sorry," right? He says, "Who made you prince and judge over us?" And he could have said, "Well, actually, Pharaoh's daughter, technically." But it's saying mockery. And he asks him, "Are you going to kill me like you killed that Egyptian yesterday?" Moses thought he was going to get away with it. Somebody saw him, either killing or burying the evidence. So somebody was watching. So Moses had moved too soon in his own strength and in his own method. So he was going to be the deliverer, but he's about 40 years off from being the deliverer. So when Pharaoh hears that what Moses has done, he wants to execute him, obviously. He's committed to murder. He wants to execute him. But which Pharaoh, right? So we go back to our Egyptian history. We find out that Thutmose II, so this is Hatshepsut's father, he was a very sickly man. A lot of them did not last a whole long time because of the incest. He only reigns for a couple of years, no more than about 3. Hatshepsut was unable to produce an heir, so Thutmose II fathered Thutmose III by a concubine. Okay, so he goes out with one of his concubines and has a child. Okay, Thutmose III. By the time Moses is killed, Hatshepsut and Thutmose III are basically co-reigning. Okay, so they're both considered the pharaoh at this time. Because of his age, he's not quite ready to take the throne as himself, and she is only considered the royal bloodline. So he's even technically not fully royal because his mom was a concubine. So she's basically kind of more ruling over him. Now, her reign was marked with peace. She wanted peace with everyone. She's got all these foreigners living in the land, okay? But Thutmose III was not interested in peace at all. Historically speaking, he is one of the most powerful and military aggressive pharaohs in Egypt's entire history, and he reigns for a total of 54 years. But during that entire time, he's trying to expand the borders of Egypt. So he's going after people and trying to expand the borders. This is the pharaoh that Moses flees from, but he is younger, okay? He's probably only a teenager, but he has the power to execute Moses for what he's done. Okay, so Moses runs about 200 to 300 miles to Midian, and he sits down by a well. He's probably at this point convinced his life is over. He can't go back to Egypt, okay? And God would probably never use him for anything, right? So he's wrong on that second point, but he doesn't know it yet.
Would his Hatshepsut, if she was still alive, would she not
Try to save him.
She would not be allowed to because of the Egyptian legal system. He did kill someone, and he killed them out of, it wasn't an accident. If it was an accident, she could have been able to save him. But because he literally has an ulterior motive of he's trying to start a revolution, she really can't do much. Yeah.
Because it was premeditated.
It was premeditated. And he
Okay.
truly believed that if he showed what he could do and showed his power, that he was going to cause these people to rise up. So yeah. So unfortunately, she doesn't have the power to save him. So Moses saw real injustice of his people. He saw genuine calling on his life, and he tried to act, but he didn't do it the right way, and it cost him everything. Okay? So let's find out what happens to Moses while he's sitting beside this well. Verse 16. Now the priests of Midian had 7 daughters. And they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. The shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and saved them and watered their flock. When they came home to their father Reuel, he said, "How is it that you have come home so soon today?" They said, "An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and even drew water for us and watered the flock." He said to his daughters, "Then where is he? Why have you left the man? Call him that he may eat bread." And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah. She gave birth to a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, "I have been a sojourner in foreign land." All right, so Moses is sitting by this well in a foreign country. He's a fugitive from Egypt, okay? And 7 sisters show up to water their father's flocks, okay? Now some other local shepherds are trying to basically push in ahead of these girls. Okay, they've arrived first, but these other shepherds just want to go get their flocks watered and move on with their day. So they're just pushing the girls out of the way. Okay, Moses is the one who stands up and he drives these other shepherds off, and he waters the entire flock himself. What is this a picture of? What does this echo back to? We have 2 earlier encounters of the well in Genesis. Rebecca watering the flocks of the servant, and we have Jacob watering Rebecca's flocks. Okay, so this is our third appearance of this. Okay, and it's interesting that they call him an Egyptian. So that means that over that entire time of 4 decades that he was an Egyptian, he looks like an Egyptian. Okay, his skin is tan from being out there. He probably would have shaved his head and had a wig on. He's dressing as an Egyptian. So they assume that he's a runaway Egyptian, and that's what they tell their father. Okay, so they go home, and their father's like, "What are you guys doing back so early? Did you not take care of the sheep?" And they tell them about their rescuer, their deliverer, the person who has saved them from their trouble. So you kind of hear all these little echoes. God's not done with Moses yet. Okay, he's given them little tasks to do. So their father is a man who is identified here as Ra'ul, but it's the only time he's called that. It means a friend of God. Later he'll be called Jethro, meaning his excellence. Okay, he asks his daughters, "Where's this guy at? He did this great, incredible thing. Where is he?" And they're like, "Oh, we just left him sitting by the well." These 7 girls.
and kept it moving.
And he's like, "Go get him, bring him home, we'll have dinner. We want to thank him for what he's done." Okay? So this man is called a priest, okay? But he's not just any priest. He is likely a descendant from Midian, who is one of the sons of Abraham through his second wife, Keturah. Okay, so he is in the line of Abraham, just not from the original 12. Okay, so God has placed Moses in the exact right spot, because although Moses probably just got tired and sat down at some random well, God knew exactly who was going to show up at that well that day. These 7 daughters of a priest of God. Okay, so Moses accepts the invitation to go home, and he doesn't just have a meal; he settles in. He's like, "Oh, I like this guy. We can chill. I like this guy." Okay? And then the father gives one of the daughters, Zipporah, to Moses, and her name means bird. They have a son who's Gershom, and it sounds like the word for sojourner, so it's kind of a play on their language. Moses named him after his feelings. Moses is saying, "I'm not from here. I'm not from Midian. I'm just sojourning here." And by that name, we get this kind of little hope for Moses. I'm not going to stay here. I'm not from here, and I'm not going to stay here. I'm just temporarily here. Okay? So he's here. He's not from here, but he hasn't forgotten where he belongs. He belongs in Egypt. Okay? So let's finish up the last couple verses of this chapter. Verse 23. During those many days, the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God, and God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. Okay? So this is not sequential, it's kind of a summary of what has been happening in Egypt, okay? Moses actually ends up staying in Midian for...
So the Pharaoh that wanted Moses killed is the one that died?
Yes, eventually, yeah. So it's kind of like a summary statement of all the 40 years that while Moses is gone,
Okay.
that everything is just getting worse in
Okay.
Egypt,
Okay.
okay?
Weren't they Ethiopian before he went at the well?
Midian would have been a little bit further north, actually closer to like Canaan. So it's about 200 to 300 miles north. Yeah. They were kind of nomads too, so they didn't really have like a country. So it's kind of like a big open area where they would have gone, because they were sheep herders, so they would have let their sheep follow. Yeah. All right. So Moses actually ends up staying in Midian for 40 years. He arrived at 40. He's going to leave at 80. Okay. That's a long time to tend sheep. Okay. And wonder if you just think you've messed up your whole life. Okay. So while Moses is in Midian, Egypt is still there, and the Israelites are still in Egypt, and they're crying out under the rule of Thutmose III. He is oppressing them more and more and more, making their lives harder, making them suffer more and more and more. And this text gives us 4 rapid verbs in succession. It tells us that God heard, God remembered, God saw, and God knew. Okay, so he heard their groanings. He remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, with Jacob. He saw the people of Israel and everything that they were doing, and he knew them. He had not forgotten. Okay? He had not moved on and decided to use somebody else. Okay? He was not distracted by all of these things that were happening. He was already going to be 80 years deep into preparing the man that he was going to use to rescue them. So Moses didn't know any of this, sitting in Midian for 40 years. He's just doing his thing every day. He gets up and he takes care of his father-in-law's sheep. He doesn't even end up having any sheep of his own. He takes care of his father-in-law's sheep. Okay? But God's not finished with him. He's just not done preparing Moses yet. Okay? So while Moses is in Midian, both Hatshepsut and Thutmose III die. Now, here's what gets even more interesting in the Egyptian history. Thutmose III's firstborn son, okay, his firstborn son is Amenemhat. Okay? This is their firstborn son. He actually ends up dying before Thutmose III dies. Okay? And eventually, their second-born son, Amenhotep II, is the second-born son. He is the one who will take the throne while Moses is gone. Okay? He is a second-born son. That becomes very important to the rest of the story. Okay? And what's worse is that when he takes the throne, okay, he tries to expunge and utterly destroy any legacy of Hatshepsut. Okay? He defaces her temple complex, all of her statues, all the inscriptions, and several of the inscriptions that she has written. She writes for herself that she is Pharaoh's daughter, even after her father dies. She calls herself Pharaoh's daughter in all of her subscriptions. Okay?
Why was he so angry?
I know, I was like, why did he want to destroy all that?
You have to remember that while she is reigning, her goal is peace. And her heart bends towards the foreign people.
Oh, yeah.
When he's reigning, he wants to expand. He wants war. He wants people to fear him. So he literally tries to erase her legacy and her years of reigning. And she is a female pharaoh. Even though she's co-reigning, she has all the royal blood. So she's technically the head pharaoh up until her concubine, her husband's concubine's son becomes old enough to become pharaoh.
Especially just read. Like to be
Absolutely. Yep. So, and we also have to remember that if this man is Moses and she was raising him up to be the next pharaoh, and then he leaves, killing a pharaoh, and he's basically gotten away with it. Or he's killed an Egyptian, but he basically got away with it because he was able to escape. And we don't know how he was able to escape, but he was able to escape.
But those are not her sons.
No,
No.
no. This is
Because
Thutmose the
The
third.
only son she got is Lois.
She couldn't have children.
She couldn't have any children, so these are sons from other concubines, not her, because she actually never has any children. Okay?
So from her husband's.
Concubines. Yeah. So they're actually not fully royal either. So you have a man who's now trying to grasp everything. Okay? So he's erasing all of the memories of her as well.
And who was her husband?
Her husband is Thutmose the second. Thutmose the second. And her dad is Thutmose the first. Okay. So he attempts to erase her legacy, but she is so entrenched in the Egyptian legacy and hearts of the people that he is unsuccessful in it being able to erase her completely.
And whose fathers is the first and the second?
Thutmose the third. So Thutmose the second has Thutmose the third through a concubine, and then he fathers these two.
These two.
Okay. that this one ends up passing away before his father, so he precedes his father in death. Okay, we have a second born son that takes the throne in Egypt while Moses is away.
But he's from a different concubine than the first son.
Yeah. Probably.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Where do you
It's
get
kind of
all,
hard with the concubines because they don't always tell us
Yeah.
which ones.
where do you get all their names at?
From actually Egyptian history.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
She not just making them up.
I knew you were, but I'm
This
so
is all
letters
in that
together.
you sent to us, right?
Yes, this
I
is
didn't-
all in that
okay.
one link. It's great.
Yes.
It
I haven't-
walks you through the
Yeah,
whole
yeah,
history.
yeah, I just
I'm
haven't
just
had
catching up
time
on
to get
them.
through it, but
Here.
yes.
It's
So,
really
So I had 2
good.
emails to
Yeah.
go through and.
It's the link that I showed you actually walks you through
That's
this whole
that's what she
reign.
was showing
and-
me, yes,
yeah.
okay.
Okay. So Moses spends about 80 years becoming the person that God needs him to be. He's 40 years educated in the palace. He's got all the brains. And 40 years humbled in the wilderness. He needs some humility with all of those brains. Neither season is complete on its own. Okay? God wants to put both of them together to use him. So, here's your challenge this week. I want you to think honestly about the season you're in right now. Not ones you had in your past, not where you want to be, but the season that you're in right now today. Does it feel productive? Does it feel like God's preparing you for something? Or like Moses, does it feel like exile? That you're just kind of being sat on the shelf for a while and you don't know when that end date is? I want you to ask God honestly this week. Show me what I'm supposed to do in this season. Not when is this going to end, or what is my lesson I'm supposed to learn. Show me you. Show me what this season is about, okay? If you think that your season has gone on too long, just remember our poor Moses, because he is going to lead sheep around for 40 years. And he will be 80 when God says it's time to go back. 80 years old.
And God gave them so many years, though. I mean, how long did Moses live?
He's over 100. I have to look it up.
Yeah, like
I wanna say
127 or
176.
something like
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Something
Like-
like that. So he's much older.
But he's
another
still not as old as the
40-something
ones
years,
back in
yeah. We're
Genesis.
still